It's been a long while since I last made a wild army build video, and today we are back with a new idea. Well, you might know that I am a big fan of leadership debuff spells, and what if we combine the two best leadership debuffs together? The Treason of Tinge, a -16 AoE leadership debuff, combined with Doom and Darkness, a single targeting leadership and another -16 debuff. That is a total of -32 leadership on a single unit, and combined with the AoE leadership debuff of the Treason of Tinge, it can basically break any unit and the units surrounding them in a quick time. So let's see what happens when you deploy this kind of leadership debuff stacking on the battlefield here, as we are taking on the Empire in quick battles on ranked multiplayer. This is, of course, a bit of a Wild West, which we do have the rather broken land ship on the enemy units, but let's see if the leadership debuffs can turn the tide. For the army builds here, other than the double sorcerers, we have a front line of aspiring champions and some marauders, backed up by a ton of chaos trolls with their armored version, providing some solid monstrous backbone to beat back enemy cavalry and just crush enemy infantry in general. A ton of skirmishing cavalry of throwing axes, marauder horsemen, 4 of them in fact, and a couple more chaos warhounds for a bit of quick mobility. The leadership, of course, are the 2 sorcerers, one the Chaos Sorcerer Lord of Tinge with Pinkfire and Treason, and behind him is a Chaos Sorcerer of Death with only Doom and Darkness on horseback. On the other side, for the Empire army, going for a rather tall build, a front line of state troops there, a ton of spears, backed up by even more spears, and a single greatsword unit. In the center for the missile core, a bit of an outrider double unit deployment, flanking a single land ship, so some pretty interesting missile combination. And further back behind them, the Demograph Knights with halberds. Yes, indeed. Not exactly the tankiest unit, but still having solid leadership and armor, they will hold longer than your Empire state troops. Theoretically, because of their added leadership and their own fear-causing trait, they should be less susceptible to leadership debuffs, especially when supported by Theodore Bruckner, who comes in with his signature Baleflame Amulet. And also Titan Headsman to reduce enemy speed and melee defense, leading the army Karlfranz proudly on his Griffin on Deathclaw, supported by a single Jade Wizard with Earthblood and Earthblood only. That's it for the army builds. Now let's just get the battle started. Right off the bat, I'll be rushing my entire army forward since the land ship can easily hit my troops while I can't really shoot back. Now, of course, I will have to specifically hide some of the units behind the tree line. Thankfully, this map does have a little bit of a vegetation here. Land ship now firing at some of my units on the flank. Chaos Warhound took some casualties, but they're just a cheap chaff unit, so nothing too important. Now the land ship is shooting at my Chaos Sorcerer of Death. Knowing that the cannons can actually reach him, I decided to park him right behind some trees. Even the Outriders will be hitting mostly the trees and missing most of their shots. Not that they have any good accuracy anyway, but with Karlfranz approaching, I'll be pulling back my Death Caster. My Tinge Caster is on a disc, so he is fine for now, while the rest of my front line moves up and the mobility flanks around, moving into that rear attack position, hoping to get to the Outriders at an opening. Now the Aspiring Champions and Marauders are moving in, but with their silver shields, the Aspiring Champions doesn't really care about any small arms fire, even if they're armor piercing, while the Marauders are cheap enough that even if they take shots from the Outriders, it is fine for me. Now with the infantry engaging in the front line, I drop down the first spell in the game, a Treason of Tinge. Aspiring Champions are already very good in melee and are just slicing through those spears without any problem, and then on top of that, Chaos Trolls jumping onto the spears, and on top of that, Doom and Darkness. Immediately these spears are getting broken by the spell combo. Earthblood trying to keep them alive, but that doesn't really matter. They have been routed away. Stand your ground trying to sustain their leadership, but because they're routed, they're not gonna regroup until they're far away from enemy units. The rest of the Aspiring Champions keep cutting down those spears and Marauders pushing in, and because all the resources are drawn to the front line, I have the opening I need, forcing my way in with a bunch of Chaos Warhounds jumping onto the Outriders and are chewing them up in melee combat with my fast mobility unit. Throwing axes on the flanks are also just positioning themselves, shooting into the important targets, like the Demograph Halberds stuck in melee against the armored Chaos Trolls. Aspiring champions now over here actually managed to get on top of the Outriders alongside with the help of some Warhounds. Flooring Axes are jumping into melee combat, really trying to shut down those enemy skirmishing firepower, because once they are down, I can kite away with my skirmishing firepower, especially shooting down the landship, which I cannot challenge in melee combat. Chaos Trolls are struggling in this fight. They have a ton of infantry support, sure, but with the nearby presence of enemy single entities and the Demogryph Halberds, they're taking a ton of damage in the melee fight right now. Not even an encouragement aura from the Aspiring Champions is enough to save them from Terror Rout. Demogryph Knights though will be the next victim of my leadership debuffed combo. The Treason of Change and Doom and Darkness stacked onto one unit, a total of minus 32 leadership. Elite as they are, after all the damage they have taken, the Demogryph Knights are not exactly in peak shape, and their leadership is dropping so low, just enough for me to rout them off. Literally 1 second before Treason of Change wears off, the rear charge of the Death Sorcerer is just enough to rout off these Demogryphs, and I'm not gonna allow them come back and get healed. Sending in those Marauder Horses to chase off this very expensive mobility. They still have almost half health and plenty of space for healing left, but the fact that there are no other Empire mobility to push back the pursuers means that these Demogryph Knights Halberds are permanently lost, while over here Landship and Karl Franz are just trying to survive here, carrying the battles on their back, trying to snipe out my Chaos Sorcerer Lord of Change, who was in the fight against the Halberd Demogryphs earlier as well, but here he is backing off from those very powerful single entities, either construct or monster. Flooring Axes are returning though, aiming down their AP missiles against the massive target on the far side. The Landship is just gonna take a ton of AP fire with no way to hit back, as it is not exactly a great piece to deal with the enemy skirmishing firepower. However, Landship and Karl Franz will still make short work of my Marauders and do some pretty good damage against my Aspiring Champions. After all, there are still some very powerful units in melee, and I don't exactly have the tools to pin them down. Chaos Trolls don't really want to deal with these terrifying single entities, so they'll just be roaming around the battlefield, smashing all these isolated spears. Aspiring Champions are now being targeted by the Landship and Karl Franz himself, but that buys more time for me with the Flooring Axes keep shooting away at the Landship. Earthbloods will be coming in from the Life Caster, since he is still around and still very much healthy, sustaining this blob of single entities, though I am eliminating all the supporting units on the Empire side, leaving only the single entities against my army really. Flooring Axes making short work of Landship, not exactly the fastest way to burst it down, but the DPS is definitely consistent. Only problem is that I am running low on ammo, at least the Landship is almost dead, and there are no regrowth to provide some burst heal and undo all my damage. At least not until the Earthblood is off cooldown anyways. There's still probably a bunch of magic left for the Life Caster to keep dropping in healing, but thankfully the Landship is down. This Unbreakable War Machine is definitely a great concern, since even if I spend all my resources taking down the other units, as long as the Landship is on the battlefield, Empire will not fall. With the Landship off the map, there's no more unbreakable backbone for Empire. Now I'm focusing my efforts on the Jade Wizard, eliminating the next most important thing of this single entity blob, the healing. Karl Franz I can probably deal with one way or the other, either surround him with a bunch of horses and psycho charge him to death, or just throw a bunch of axes in his face. But I can't really do that if the Life Caster healing is still on the field. So here I am jumping in with the Marauder Horsemen and surrounding him with the Chaos Trolls as well. Once again, I'm dropping in that Treason of Change and Doom and Darkness combo. This is the third time I'm dropping in the combo in this game, and once again it has successfully routed off an enemy unit. And because I am controlling the battlefield with my mobility right now, this Jade Wizard is not coming back as well. Basically, the idea is to stick a bunch of Marauder Horsemen up his bum and make sure he has permanent enemy presence nearby, preventing him from regrouping. Even if these Flooring Axes have been routed away by Karl Franz, I do have more Marauder Horsemen in reserve. These ones ran out of ammo just now and are free to engage in melee and keep chasing off the routed Life Caster. The Jade Wizard is not coming back, and Karl Franz and Theodor Bruckner are truly alone. I don't really want to kill Theodor Bruckner right now because he does have that Bale Flame Amulet, giving him quite a bit of a deadly explosion once he dies and can inflict significant casualties. But Karl Franz though, he is prone to Flooring Axes and he is prone to Psycho Charges from all my army support as well. Even the Chaos Trolls are back now, surrounding and beating down the massive Griffin. Another Treason of Tinge is going down on Karl Franz, as there are no more AoE spells on the Empire side, since the Jade Wizard is still being routed, and now Karl Franz has been routed, broken off by that -16 leadership debuff, and that shall be GG for the Empire. Victory belongs to the leadership combo. This build is of course particularly good against low leadership factions. Stacking the 32 leadership debuff is enough to force most chaff routing from a fight, so factions like Greenskins and Skavens would be especially susceptible. Even units with moderately high leadership like the Chaos Dwarf Warriors can fall to the leadership debuff stacking if you put a bit more pressure and terror onto them. The spells are rather cheap and cost effective on their own, so you can just use one of them depending on the situation and don't necessarily have to stack them up unless you want to route specific units. And if you really want to route off a blob, you can overcast Doom and Darkness, which turns it into an AoE spell, stacking on top of Treason of Tinge, and there you go, an AoE 32 leadership debuff. Theoretically, this leadership debuff spell combo should be good against demonic units as well, since the leadership debuffs can trigger demonic instability crumble early and get that damage snowballing going. The only problem is that some of the demons do have very high leadership. Take this Khorne army here for example. The Hellforged Host is a super elite Khorne infantry demon. Even if I throw a Doom and Darkness on top, they will still have enough leadership to keep themselves in the fight and deny demonic instability. Just like all leadership debuffs, this Treason of Tinge and Doom and Darkness combo will be less effective against high leadership factions, like Khorne or Dwarfs and High Elves. The same goes for factions that simply don't route, specifically the Undead. While you can still force them into crumbling, the damage they take from crumbling is way less than demonic instability, so you're better off just using other spells to do damage. Theoretically, you can bring Herald Hammerstorm to make the Undead route, but he's super expensive, and on top of that, the Undead chaff don't have good leadership anyway, so they will route off early, without needing to stack those leadership debuffs. There are actually multiple ways to play this leadership debuff combo. For example, you can switch your sorcerer hero into a Nurgle Sorcerer of Death, using a Chaos War Shrine to boost the healing of surrounding units. And at the same time, you can also change your Chaos Sorcerer Lord of Tinge into an Undivided Sorcerer Lord of Death, using your Lord to cast Doom and Darkness, while your hero caster would be a Sorcerer of Tinge to cast Treason. That can be boosted up by Skull of Catan, boosting the leadership debuff from -16 to -25 if I remember correctly. Or you can use it as a Demons of Chaos army, using a Tinge Demon character to cast the Treason of Tinge and gaining access to the Lord of Death with a Nurgle caster. Or you can swap them around, but I would say that the best way, the most cost-effective way to cast this leadership debuff stacking is still using an Undivided Warriors of Chaos roster, using a Tinge Sorcerer Lord plus an Undivided Sorcerer of Death. Demonic characters simply are too expensive to make the leadership debuff combo worth it, and the Tinge Sorcerer Lord does have a very nice utility item, the Sword of Change, to summon Chaos Spawns. Also, don't forget to put your Tinge caster on a disc to make sure they can fly and stay away from any melee threats. Now let's wrap up this army build video with a quick summary in the post-battle screen. For the army performances, the Marauder Horsemen basically carried my game here, alongside with the leadership debuffs, chasing off all the routed units including the Outriders, the Demogryph Knights, which are very expensive, and they broke early solely because of the leadership debuff combos, and of course the AP fire from the Marauder Horsemen also shut down the landship rather early. And on top of that, the infantry did fine. The aspiring champions, one of them earned back their own cost, the other not so much, but they still did some okay work against the enemy infantry, cleaving apart those state troops. Chaos Trolls unfortunately didn't have any good engagements, mostly fighting against anti-large troops or against terror-causing single entities, so their value was very limited. Warhounds did meh, while the single entities here, the double sorcerer build, they didn't do a lot of direct damage, but that leadership debuffs are absolutely crucial against routing off enemy key units, including the first spear breaking off that Empire front line with that leadership debuff, and then the Demogryphs, and in the end, eliminating the Jade Wizard, denying Karl Franz from getting any more heals in the late game. For the Empire army here, Karl Franz did okay, but the carry of course is the OP land ship, almost 3k worth of damage value, shutting down units left, right and center, running over my infantry and shooting up the Chaos Trolls, scaring them away alongside the terror of the Death Claw of Karl Franz. The spears, unfortunately, state troops all didn't really perform that well as they are up against enemies of a different weight class, the Aspiring Champions, the Chaos Trolls, and on top of that, leadership debuffs, so they got shut down pretty hard. Outriders also got shut down early by the mobility overwhelming them from my side, and yeah, that's it for the battles today. I hope you all enjoyed this little bit of a leadership debuff army build. Overall, it can be very handy against certain factions, using that leadership debuff to rout off enemies when they should not. And on top of that, it is rather easy to set up, both Treason and Doom and Darkness being rather cheap spells. Even units with relatively high leadership supported by enemy characters like the Demogryph with Halberds can be routed off away with this leadership debuff stacking. What do you think about the build? Feel free to share your thoughts in the comment section below. That's it for today's video, and I'll see you in the next one. Tactical Lich, signing out.